Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, Part 11. Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam tayapahata chetasam vyavasayatmika buddhihi samadau na vidiyate. Those whose minds are carried away by such flowery speech, who are attracted towards pleasures and who are deeply attached to pleasure and prosperity, can't attain the determinate intellect concentrated on God. Their minds are carried away by such flowery speech that there is a great pleasure in heaven, there are celestial damsels, there is a blissful garden, and there is nectar, etc. Pleasures of five senses, sound, touch, color, taste, smell, comfort to the body, and desire for respect and praise or bhoga, the worldly enjoyments. Accumulation of money and material to enjoy those worldly pleasures is called Aishwarya, prosperity. Those who cling to pleasures and prosperity are called Bhogaishwarya Prasaktanam. Such people are called demoniacal, Asura. In Sanskrita, Asu stands for life breath, and he who wants to maintain life breath is a Asura. Vyavasayatmika buddhihi samadau na vidiyate. Such type of people who instinctively cling to pleasures and prosperity can't attain the determinate intellect to realize God because their intellect has become impure. Similarly, the people who have pride of their being learned by acquiring the worldly art or science or knowledge can't attain the determinate intellect, that is decision, to realize God. Something noteworthy. All gracious God by His grace has bestowed discrimination upon human beings so that they may attain God or salvation. But human beings, giving cold shoulder to this discrimination, cling to pleasures like birds and animals. They forget that enjoyment of pleasures is not the goal of human life, but its supreme object is the attainment of perfection, and all the circumstances, whether favorable or unfavorable, they are placed in are the means to attain perfection, that is, God realization. So they can't have the sole desire for God realization. The fact is that the worldly pleasures and objects are not the real obstacles to God realization, but attachment to them is the main hindrance. So long as this attachment continues, not to talk of God realization, the people can't even make up their minds to attain God because their minds are drawn away by worldly pleasures and prosperity. To confirm something, it is necessary that one should view the pros and cons of the matter. In the previous three verses, there is a description of infirm in mind who are obsessed by desires. Now, Sri Krishna Paramatma inspires Arjuna to attain the ideal by being established in the eternal existence, that is God, transcending the three gunas, that is attributes, and being free from all desires. Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvasto Niryogakshema Atmavan. O Arjuna, the Vedas deal with the three gunas and the revolutes. Be free from those attributes, rise above the pairs of opposites, remain balanced, be unconcerned about the supply of wants and preservation of what has been already attained, and get established in the self. Here, the Vedas have been used for the ritualistic portions of the Vedas which deal with the three gunas, and the revolutes in the form of worldly and heavenly enjoyments. Here, the purpose is not to censure the Vedas, but it is to glorify the selfless spirit. In reference to the diamond and the piece of glass, the aim is to eulogize the diamond rather than to censure the piece of glass. The Vedas don't only mention the means to satisfy desires of the worldly minded people, but they also contain sublime and elevating ideas on God and the means to realize Him. O Arjuna, be free from the evolutes of these attributes, be free from the worldly enjoyments as well as the means of attaining such enjoyments. For a striver to transcend the worldly enjoyments, it is inevitable to be free from the pairs of opposites such as attachment and aversion, because they are his real enemies and they are the stumbling block in his spiritual progress. Here, Sri Krishna Paramatma orders Arjuna to rise above the pairs of opposites because through their delusion, mature human beings are enveloped in utter ignorance. When a striver gets rid of this delusion, he can worship him with a firm resolve. By transcending these pairs of opposites, he is easily freed from bondage because he is undeluded and he is not bound. So, the Lord wants him to be free from the pairs of opposites. Another thing is that if a person develops attachment for one person or a thing, he is sure to develop aversion to other persons or things. By having such attachment to the world, an aspirant turns indifferent to God. This indifference is a sort of aversion to God. But if he develops true devotion to God without having any attachment or aversion to the world, he develops total disinclination for it. The total disinclination has 3 stages. In the first stage, the aspirant has no hatred for unfavorable circumstances, but there is upeksha. In the second stage, there is udashinata, that is unconcernedness. While in the third stage, there is total disinclination. In the last stage, total disinclination, attachment, and aversion are totally wiped out. If this process is considered minutely, we find that in upeksha there remain impressions of attachment and aversion. In udashinata, the feelings of attachment and aversion remain, while in total disinclination, there are neither impressions nor feelings of attachment and aversion. In this state, attachment and aversion are totally wiped out. The means to rise above the pairs of opposites is to get established in the omnipresent and everlasting God. Don't have the desire even for the provision of the means required and the preservation of what has already been attained, because I provide for and preserve all for those who have exclusive devotion to me. Having the aim of God realization, get established in the self, eternal existence or God. In the next verse, Sri Krishna Paramatma explains what one achieves by transcending the 3 gunas, that is attributes. Yavanartha udapane sarvatas samplutodake tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vijanataha. A Brahmana who has obtained enlightenment has the same use for all the Vedas as one has for a small reservoir of water in a place flooded with water on all sides. A small reservoir of water is useful in a place where there is no other source of water. But nobody ever pays any attention to such a reservoir of water in a locality submerged with pure water. Moreover, that small reservoir of water becomes dirty and impure and can't be used for drinking purpose after washing and bathing in it. But the water of a large stream remains clean and pure even after washing and bathing in it. Likewise, oblations, charities, penances, and pilgrimages, etc., mentioned in the Vedas are of use to those who are still ignorant. But they become meaningless to the illumined souls who have realized God. The same kind of comparison has been made in the 70th verse, that the emancipated souls are like the sea. As several rivers fall into it, but its magnitude remains the same. Similarly, the illumined souls remain undisturbed, though several kinds of pleasures and enjoyments merge themselves into them. The great soul who possesses knowledge of the Lord, the Vedas and the scriptures is called Brahmanasya Vijanataha. By using the term Tavan, Sri Krishna Paramatma means to say that the great soul, after realizing God, transcends the 3 attributes, that is modes or gunas, and rises above the pairs of opposites, becomes free from attachment and aversion, gets established in the self and remains unconcerned about provision and preservation. He always remains devoted to God. In the 39th verse, Sri Krishna Paramatma ordered Arjuna to listen to the discourse on evenness of mind. Now in the next verse, he orders him to perform his duty in order to attain that equanimity, that is evenness of mind. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma paleshu kadhachana ma karma palaheturbuhu ma te sangostva karmani. Your right is to perform your duty only, but never lay claim to its fruit. Let not the fruit of action be your object, nor let your attachment be to inaction. Your right is to perform your duty. You are free in it because no other bodies, as those of animals and birds, etc., are free to perform new actions. Only human beings are eligible to perform new actions. The gods can perform new actions and can bestow money and material upon human beings according to the ordinance of the Lord, but they are too voluptuous to perform new actions. They are destined only to reap the fruit of their meritorious deeds. The creatures in hells also can't perform new actions. They suffer the fruits of their actions. God has bestowed this human birth, the very last of all births, so that by performing new actions in the form of selfless service to others, the man may achieve salvation and be free from the bondage of the cycle of birth and death. If he remains engaged in selfish actions, it will result in bondage. In case he is given to indolence and heedlessness, he will follow the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, the Lord advises human beings to render selfless services for the common good. The term karmani has been used in singular number as karmani to emphasize the fact that though man has to perform several duties in his life, he can perform only one at a particular time. Arjuna, as a man of the warrior class, has several duties such as fighting, generosity, and bravery, and so on. But at present, he can perform only one of them, to wage the war. A vital fact. In all the other births, that is, those of birds, animals, insects, and even gods, the creatures can reap the fruits of their actions, but can't perform new actions. But there are two things about human life: reaping the fruits of the deeds of earlier lives and performing new ones. God has bestowed upon him this human body so that by performing new virtuous actions without having a desire for their fruits, he may attain God realization or salvation. As far as the fruit of his previous actions is concerned, it may come in the form of favorable and unfavorable circumstances. He can't change those circumstances but can make proper use of them, and they can lead him to salvation if he uses them properly. An important fact which needs attention is that favorable or unfavorable circumstances can't make a man happy or sad. It is merely his ignorance which makes him happy or sad, because he identifies himself with those circumstances and thus becomes the experiencer of happiness or sadness. But if he gives a serious thought, he will come to know that the external circumstances can't make his internal self either happy or sad. He should make proper use of the favorable circumstances by serving others and of the undesirable ones by renouncing the desire to enjoy pleasures. In unfavorable circumstances, a man should not be perturbed but should think that the sins which were committed to get pleasures are perishing in the form of unfavorable circumstances, and this thought is a kind of repentance for the sins committed. Secondly, it is a forewarning to us that we shall have to face adverse consequences if we commit sins again. So, we should perform actions for the welfare of all creatures rather than for our own pleasures. For insects, birds, and animals, the fruit of past actions and also the present actions are only to work out their destinies. But in case of human beings, the fruit of past actions and also the present activities are the means for salvation. Don't lay claim to the fruit of action because you are not free in getting it. It is dispensed by the Lord. If you perform actions with a desire for fruits, you will get bound. It is a desire for fruits which makes a person an agent for actions. With the melting away of desire, the sense of doership is gone. Obliteration of the sense of doership does not lead a man to bondage. It means that a man is much more entangled in desires. Secondly, all the actions are performed with the help of the worldly objects and persons. So it is dishonest to desire the fruits of those actions for one's own self. The desire for fruit of actions is not beneficial for human beings. Never lay claim to its fruit. This expression proves that it is up to a man whether he lays claim to the fruit of an action or not. He is free in this respect. The term paleshu has been used in the plural because a man by performing an action desires several fruits such as riches, regard and reputation. The means to be free from the desire for fruits of action are as follows. Number 1. Desire causes a feeling of something lacking. Its fulfillment makes one a slave. Its non-fulfillment causes suffering. The pleasure derived out of fulfillment of desire gives birth to new desires, and a man goes on getting interested in performing new actions in order to reap their fruit. By understanding this fact in the right perspective, a man becomes free from the desire for fruit of actions. Number 2. Actions have a beginning and an end. They are not eternal. So, how can their fruits be eternal? But the self is eternal. How can the eternal get any benefit from the perishable? By understanding this fact, he becomes detached from the world and attains God realization. In order to be free from the desire for fruits of action, an aspirant should have discrimination as well as the feelings to serve others. Discrimination will be helpful to a striver in renouncing his comforts, while the feelings of service to others will enable him to do good to others. By doing so, a striver can follow the discipline of disinterested action in the right sense. Let the fruits of action not be your object. It means that you should not have the least attachment for the body, senses, mind and intellect and so on, because attachment for them will make you responsible for the fruit of action. In the 11th verse of the 5th chapter also, Sri Krishna Paramatma, by using the term Kevalaihi, wants to say that the follower of the discipline of disinterested action should abandon attachment for the body, mind, intellect and senses. If a striver becomes the agent, that is doer of a virtuous action, even without having a desire for its fruit, he is held responsible for the fruit of the action, because by doing so he has accepted his affinity for the mind, intellect and senses, which are unreal. Actually, we have no affinity with them. They have their affinity for the world. When anybody else performs an action for the good of others, we don't accept our affinity for the action and its fruit, and so are not held responsible. We should adopt the same attitude in the case of our own actions as well, so that we may not be held responsible for the fruits of the actions. Let your attachment not be to inaction also, because by leaning towards inaction you will become lazy and idle. And like the desire for fruit, it will also mislead you to bondage. The reason is that indolence and prolonged sleep, etc., also gives pleasure, that is tamasika joy, which misleads either to the lower births of insects, birds, and beasts or to infernal regions. It means that attachment misleads to bondage and is the cause of birth in good and evil wombs. You should not be attached to inaction by thinking that it will lead you to progress here and hereafter, because the real essence is beyond action or inaction. In this verse, the Lord means to say that a striver should remain detached from objects, men, action, incidents, circumstances, and physical, subtle, causal bodies, and so on, without having the least affinity to them. In this verse, there are 4 points which needs attention. Number 1, your right is to perform your duty, that is action only. Number 2, never lay claim to its fruit. Number 3, let the fruit of action not be your object. Number 4. Let your attachment not be to inaction. Out of these 4 points, the first and the fourth have the same theme because both of them lay emphasis on the performance of duty or action. Similarly, the second and the third points have the same theme because in both of them it is mentioned that you should not desire the fruit of action. It means that by leaning towards inaction, you will have affinity to tamashika temperament such as idleness and laziness. By having attachment for action and its fruit, you will have affinity for rajashika temperament. But when a striver is free from laziness, idleness, actions, fruit of actions, and so on, he gets the joy born of knowledge and light, and having attachment for it, he has affinity to sattvika temperament. Affinity with them is the cause of birth and death. Therefore, a striver should not have attachment for either of them. Doing one's duty without having any attachment to them is called the discipline of disinterested action.